They left her behind, not with words, not even with cruelty, just absence, sharp, deliberate, bone-deep absence. When her belly started to swell, they looked the other way. When her breath shortened and her back ached from long shifts in the fields, no one offered a seat. No one asked if she was okay. They had already made their decision. She wasn't wanted. Neither was the child. She wasn't a wife. She wasn't a widow. She wasn't anyone that fit neatly into their prayers or pity. Just another nameless girl, with a secret and a silence, taking up space in a world too eager to move on from people like her. She had come west with a wagon train, not because she believed in the promise of the frontier, but because staying where she was meant starving alone in a town that had already buried her alive. The baby's father, gone before she could even say the word pregnant out loud. He had taken her youth like it was his right, then vanished with the harvest, never once looking back. She didn't chase him. She chased survival. At first, the other settlers let her ride in silence, her hands calloused from cooking over fires and holding ropes too tight. But when her belly started showing, the glances changed, the whispers started, and the space around her grew wider. By the time they reached the open plains, they had stopped speaking to her altogether. The final blow came just before dusk, a broken wheel, a short supply count, and a quiet vote behind her back. They left her, no tent, no mule, no food, just a blanket, a jug of water, and the kind of mercy that tastes like ash in the mouth. She didn't beg, didn't cry. She just sat there as the wagons moved on, one by one, leaving dust and nothing else. The silence after was so loud it made her ears ring. For 2 days, she walked. Not because she had hope that had burned out long ago, but because stillness would mean death. Her feet cracked open, her lips bled, her hands trembled as she clutched her belly and whispered to the life inside her, "I'm trying." She didn't believe it, but maybe the child would. By the 3rd day, the sun turned cruel. She collapsed near a stretch of wild grass, the kind that dances even without wind. She thought, "This is it. This is how it ends." Buried in a place with no name, remembered by no one, but the land had other plans. She woke to the sound of hooves, soft at first, then closer. She tried to sit up, but her limbs refused. Her vision blurred until all she saw was a shape, tall, still, unmoving. A man, not a settler, not white. His hair was long, braided down his back. His clothes spoke of earth and history. He looked down at her with eyes like river stone, unreadable, steady, impossibly alive. She tried to speak, but only a breath escaped. He knelt, placed a hand on her forehead, then stood, and without a word, lifted her in his arms like she weighed nothing at all. She wanted to fight, but even more than that, she wanted to believe. Believe that someone had come not to use her, not to punish her, not to pity her, but simply to see her. She passed out before they reached the camp. But in those few seconds before sleep took her, she saw them faces around a fire, soft voices, hands reaching for water, a language she didn't understand but felt in her bones. And in the center of it all, the man's voice, speaking just one sentence to the others. "She's ours now." She woke in fragments, warmth, a crackling fire, the weight of soft hides pulled over her chest, the scent of earth and smoke and something sweet, maybe boiled roots or dried herbs hanging from the ceiling above. Her eyes fluttered open to a roof not made of wood or brick, but hide stretched tight, darkened by age and weather. It was quiet, not empty, but intentional, the kind of silence that holds you instead of forgetting you. She blinked slowly. Her body ached, but not with the kind of sharpness she feared. More like fatigue, deep and old and heavy. She tried to sit. A voice stopped her, low, calm, male. "Wait." She turned her head. It was him, the man from before, the one who had carried her. He sat across the fire, sharpening something small with a stone, movements precise, slow, unbothered by her confusion. Where she tried, her voice dry and broken. "You're safe," he said. "Rest." She looked down at her hands, trembling in her lap. She'd heard that word before, safe, but never like this. Never without condition, without cost. Her mind raced. Where was she? Who were these people? Why hadn't they sent her away yet? Later that day, a woman entered, older, sharp-eyed, her hair streaked with silver, but her movement steady. She brought a bowl of something warm, set it near her without a word, then sat. Silence stretched between them, like fabric being tested for strength. Then finally, the older woman spoke. "You came from the wagons." Not a question. She nodded slowly. "They left you." Another nod. This time her eyes burned, but she refused to cry. The woman said nothing more, just pushed the bowl closer. "Eat. You're not dead yet." The taste brought tears. Not from the heat, from memory. Because it had been so long since someone had offered her something without expecting anything in return. Over the next few days, she healed slowly. They didn't ask for explanations. They didn't prod or pry. They let her sit by the fire in silence. Let her breathe. Let her feel her body again without flinching. The camp was small, not a village, not a band, but something in between. Families, warriors, elders, children who laughed as they chased each other barefoot across the dirt. And always, always that man, the one who had carried her nearby, watching, not with suspicion, with attention. His name, she would learn, was Matto, Bear. It suited him, not for his size or strength, though both were evident, but for the way he moved through space. Quiet, grounded, with a kind of stillness that made you listen even when he wasn't speaking. One evening, as the sun dipped below the trees and the shadows grew long, she sat alone outside her lodge, hands resting on her swollen belly. She felt the baby move, a sharp kick against her ribs. Alive, still alive, despite everything. She hadn't touched her stomach like that in weeks, months maybe, afraid that doing so would invite hope, and hope was dangerous. Hope got you left behind. But now, she whispered softly, "You're still with me." Behind her, Matto spoke, "And you are still with them." She turned, startled. He hadn't made a sound. He nodded toward the camp, toward the firelight, toward the faces that now watched her, not with fear or suspicion, but recognition. "You think you are alone," he said, "but we don't see you that way." She opened her mouth to argue, to say she wasn't one of them, that she didn't belong, that she hadn't earned this place, but no sound came. Because maybe he was right. Maybe for the first time, someone saw her not as a burden, but as a beginning. A woman stood by the fire that night and sang a low, aching melody that moved like wind through the tall grass. The others joined, one by one, their voices rising in harmony, not meant for performance, but for remembering. Matto sat beside her, legs folded, eyes closed. She leaned into the music. And for the first time since she'd been abandoned, she didn't think of the men who left her. She thought of the hands that fed her, the arms that carried her, the people who looked her in the eye and said without words, "You are not a mistake." She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for now, she belonged. The days became rhythm, waking to the scent of sage and smoke, walking barefoot across packed earth, still cool from night. The women taught her to grind herbs, to sort roots by color and use, to braid hair in patterns that spoke of memory. They didn't question her past, only invited her into the present. It was disorienting at first, this acceptance without interrogation. She was used to earning every crumb of affection, bending herself into whatever shape others demanded just to be tolerated. Here, they asked only one thing, be. She started to laugh again. At first, short bursts surprised, cautious, then louder, freer. The children followed her everywhere, fascinated by her pale skin and soft accent, asking endless questions about what bread tasted like or why settlers used so many different spoons. She didn't know all the answers, but they didn't care. They wanted her stories. Even the broken ones, especially the broken ones. There was a boy named Chaska who reminded her of the child growing inside her, wide-eyed, quiet, observant. He brought her a stone one day, round and smooth, and said, "It looks like you." She almost cried, not because it was true, but because someone had looked at her and seen something soft. Matto remained a constant presence. Not intrusive, just there. He showed her how to follow trails, how to read the direction of the wind by the bend of tall grass. One afternoon he handed her a blade carved from obsidian and said, "For shaping." She remembered those same words from somewhere, or maybe they were just what she needed to hear. "For shaping what?" she asked. "Yourself." Some nights she couldn't sleep. The memories still crept in the wagons, fading into the horizon, the ache of abandonment. But now, instead of curling into herself, she would walk outside, sit beside the dying fire and breathe. Sometimes Matto would join her. They wouldn't speak. They didn't need to. One night, she finally asked him, "Why did you take me in?" He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Because you were left. Simple, final, undeniable." It struck her harder than she expected. She wanted to believe there was more, that maybe he saw something in her, something worth saving. But maybe, just maybe, that was the point. He hadn't needed a reason beyond her existence. She was there, she was alive, and that was enough. The others began to treat her differently, not like a guest, like someone who would stay. The elders asked for her hands in preparing ceremonies. The young women asked her advice, even though she didn't feel wise. Someone gifted her a woven shawl, red and brown, patterned with feathers. For the child, they said. But the child brought fear with each passing day, not because she didn't want it, because she wasn't sure she could give it the life it deserved. One evening she stood at the edge of the water, watching her reflection blur and ripple. She spoke softly to the life inside her. "I don't know if I'll be enough." Behind her, a voice answered, "You already are." She turned. It was the elder woman who had fed her on the first day. Her name was Wihina, meaning woman who waits. "Your child will not remember what you've lost," Wihina said. "Only what you offer now." She broke then, not loudly. Just a single sob, like the crack of ice under spring thaw, and Wihina held her, not like a child, not like someone broken, but like someone sacred. The next morning she braided her own hair, for the first time. Not to look beautiful, to feel woven, whole, claimed. The others noticed. She didn't say anything, she didn't need to, because for the first time in her life, she didn't feel like something borrowed. She felt like someone who belonged. It wasn't just her body preparing for birth. It was the land around her. The wind changed. It carried the scent of water before rain. The birds grew louder at dawn. The elders watched the moon more closely, tracking its shape like a story unfolding in the sky. She started to feel it too, the shifting, not pain, not yet, just a deep, ancient knowing in her bones that something was coming, not just the child, but something she couldn't name. Matto had grown quieter, if that was even possible. He was never far, always within reach, but he gave her more space now, as if he understood that this part of the path wasn't one he could walk with her. Some crossings are done alone, even when you're surrounded by love. One morning, Wihina entered her lodge without a word and began gathering dried leaves and bundles of cloth. When she looked up in confusion, the elder smiled gently. "It's time to prepare the ground," she said. "Not for the baby, for you." That day, they built the birthing space, a lodge apart from the others, near the trees, where birds nested in the branches and the wind moved like prayer. The floor was layered with soft hide. Herbs were hung from the frame in bundles, yarrow for pain, sweetgrass for calm, cedar for protection. They placed her feather, the one given to her that first week, in the center of the space. A reminder, Wihina said, of who she had become. Each day after that, women came in silence to sit with her. They didn't speak unless she did. They simply braided her hair, rubbed oils into her back, sang songs too old to be written. She asked one of them once, "What do the songs mean?" The woman smiled and answered, "They don't mean, they carry." That night, Mato stood outside her lodge as the fire burned low. She joined him, her hands resting over her belly. "You'll be a good mother," he said. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to hold that truth like a shield. "I don't know how," she whispered. "No one does," he said, "but you know how to stay. That's enough." She looked at him, really looked, the way his eyes didn't flinch, the way his words never tried to fix her, the way he had said ours when no one else even wanted to say her name. And in that moment, without touch, without promise, something between them settled into place, not romance, not ownership, something deeper, recognition. The next morning, she woke to pain, real pain. Low and constant, like the ground itself pulling at her bones. She knew it was time. They moved quickly but calmly. No panic, no rushing, just hands guiding her to the birthing lodge, voices low, movements practiced. Mato remained outside, sitting cross-legged, his hands resting on his knees. She could feel his presence like a heartbeat outside the walls. Inside, the women surrounded her. Wihina held her hand. The others moved like shadows, placing herbs under her tongue, pressing cloth to her forehead, whispering songs not meant for ears, but for the spirit. The labor was long, not cruel, but relentless. Her body shook, her voice cracked. She wanted to give up more than once, but then she heard it. Not a sound from outside, a sound from within. Her own voice rising in a guttural, primal cry that didn't come from pain, it came from power. A sound that had waited her entire life to be released. And then silence, and then the cry. High, clear, alive. They placed the child on her chest, warm, wrinkled, covered in everything she had given. A girl, tiny, perfect, whole. She looked down at the baby and didn't think of the ones who had left her. She thought of the ones who had stayed. Wihina leaned in and asked, "Her name?" She didn't hesitate. "Taku Wiaka," she said. "What is ours?" Outside the lodge, Mato heard the name and closed his eyes. Because he knew she hadn't just birthed a child. She had claimed her place in the world, not as a guest, not as a burden, as a mother, as a warrior, as one of them. Days passed, but not in the way they used to. There was no calendar now, no clock ticking overhead. Time moved by how the baby breathed, by how long the fire burned through the night, by the rhythm of her feet brushing the dirt floor as she rocked Taku Wiaka in her arms. The village didn't celebrate with noise. They celebrated with presence. Women brought gifts woven with their own stories, a cradleboard carved with eagle feathers, a beaded bracelet once worn by another mother who had survived the impossible. She didn't know what to say, so she said, "Thank you," with her eyes. And that was enough. Wihina came every morning to check on them. She never knocked, just stepped through the flap with that quiet certainty that only time and wisdom grant. She would hold the baby against her shoulder and tell her soft things in Lakota stories of the stars, of spirits, of how women like her had walked through winters far colder than this and still learned to sing. "She listens," Wihina said one morning. "She doesn't understand the words," she replied, smiling. Wihina shook her head. "She doesn't need to. Her bones understand." That night, she stepped outside the lodge while Taku Wiaka slept beside the fire. She needed to move, to feel the wind again. Her body was still sore, her legs not as strong as before, but she walked anyway, slowly, deliberately, until she reached the tree line. Mato was there. He didn't speak, just looked at her with that steady silence that once scared her and now grounded her. "She sleeps like the stars are holding her," she said. He nodded. "She's not like me," she added, almost whispering. "She won't carry what I carried." "She carries you," he said. "That's different." She turned her face to the trees, let the wind wrap around her shoulders like a second skin. "Do you think I'll be enough?" she asked. Matto didn't answer immediately. He never did. Then finally, "You are already more than enough, because you stayed." That word again, stayed. It echoed in her bones. In every moment she had been tempted to leave, to disappear, to fade into the dirt the way the world had tried to bury her. But she hadn't. She had stayed. And now she had roots. Real ones. Not just in the land, in the eyes of her daughter, in the voice of Wihina, in the way the children stopped calling her the Pale Woman and started calling her Ina Wiaka Motherfeather. She had become more than her own survival. She had become someone others looked to. One afternoon, a young girl came to her trembling. She was newly bled, afraid, ashamed. She had been told by her uncle that her body made her dirty now, that she had to be silent, invisible. Wiaka held her hand, told her, "You are not dirty, you are becoming." She led her to the river, let her wash her hands in the cold stream, and said, "You are not what they say. You are what you choose." And the girl wept, not from sadness, from recognition. Later that night, Wihina placed her hand on Wiaka's shoulder. "You remembered what we forgot," she said. "What do you mean?" "That sometimes it's the ones who come from farthest away who see the truth most clearly." She thought of the girl she used to be. The girl who had been told she was unwanted, unworthy, unclean. She thought of the nights she begged the wind to take her, the mornings she refused to open her eyes, and now here she was, holding life in her arms, speaking truth into others, becoming a story worth telling. She didn't feel like a hero. She didn't feel like anything extraordinary. She just felt real, alive. And no one could take that from her again. Spring came like a hush. Not in bloom, but in breath, a softer wind through the trees, the kind that didn't bite your skin but kissed it. The snow receded in slow, lazy lines, revealing patches of green too shy to celebrate yet. And still, every morning, she woke with the same thought. I'm still here. It was no longer survival. It was presence, a different kind of strength, not loud, not sharp, but rooted. Taku Wiaka was growing faster than she expected. Her fingers clutched like they remembered something older. Her eyes followed the birds as if she understood the language of wings. She rarely cried, only when she was cold or hungry or needed to be held. And every time she cried, Wiaka came running, not with fear, but with readiness, with open arms and a quiet hum in her throat. She has your stillness, Matto said one morning as they watched the baby sleep on a bed of furs. No, she replied. She has my fire. I just didn't know how to use it when I had it. He looked at her then, like he was seeing her for the first time, not as the woman who'd arrived half dead and voiceless, but as someone who had become whole with nothing but time, silence, and truth. The elders began asking her to sit closer during council gatherings, not to vote, to witness, because something about her presence reminded them that the earth doesn't always need to be tilled by old hands. Sometimes it's the new roots that hold the ground steady. One evening, a messenger arrived from a nearby band. They were asking for help. Sickness had swept through their people, and they were short on herbs, on hands, on hope. Wihina looked to Wiaka. Will you go? She didn't hesitate. Yes. Matto rode with her, cradling supplies on his back. They moved through valleys that once would have terrified her open land, exposed sky, trails too quiet for comfort. Now she rode like she belonged, like she had something worth carrying. When they arrived, the sight broke her heart. Children with sunken eyes, elders too weak to speak, mothers wringing cloths over fevered heads with desperation in their eyes. Wiaka didn't panic. She got to work. She distributed roots in measured hands, taught younger women how to prepare poultices, held the sick through their shivers, and when one child died in her arms, his breath fading with the sunset, she sang, not to ease her own pain, to hold his spirit steady as it crossed. Later, one of the women from the band came to her, eyes red but voice clear. "You are not from here," she said, "but you carry the mountain in your spine. You are not of our blood, but we would follow you into fire." Wiaka bowed her head, unsure how to carry praise that once would have shattered her. But she accepted it because she knew who she was now. They stayed for 10 days. On the last day, Wiaka stood in the center of the camp, Taku Wiaka strapped to her chest, and looked around at the faces that once would have seen her as other. Now they saw her as something else. Anchor, flame, medicine. When she returned to her own camp, they welcomed her not with cheers, but with gifts, a new shawl, stitched with red thread and small feathers. "It's time," Wihina said. "Time for what?" "For your story to become theirs." She didn't understand until the next full moon. The fire was high. The children sat close, and Wihina called her name. Tonight we listened to the one who became herself. Wiaka stood slowly, hands trembling slightly, voice steady. She told them everything, not just the pain, the silence, the betrayal, the blood, the night she thought of walking into the river and letting it take her, but also the fire, the hands that held her, the voice that said, "She's ours." And when she finished, no one clapped. They just sat with it. Like it was a truth they'd known all along, they just needed her to say it. Later, Mato walked her back to her lodge. Neither spoke, until he paused outside the door. He looked at her. "Do you still believe you weren't enough?" She didn't answer. She just opened the door, held it for him and said, "Come in." Years passed the way rivers do not in straight lines, but in memory, in erosion, in the shape they leave behind on the land. Taku Wiaka learned to walk beneath wide skies, her small feet dusted with soil, her voice bright and bold, like she had never known shame. She grew up not with absence, but with fire. Not with fear, but with names her own, her mother's, and the ones they chose together. Wiaka became more than a mother. She became part of the soil. Her hands knew the roots by touch. Her feet knew which paths to follow by instinct. She didn't ask for permission anymore. She didn't wait to be chosen. She simply showed up every day with quiet eyes and open hands, and people noticed. When new faces came, a young girl with bruises, a boy cast out for speaking differently, a woman left by her husband after the last hard winter, they didn't go to the elders first. They went to her, because she didn't ask, "What happened?" She asked, "Are you hungry?" And sometimes that was the only question that needed answering. One autumn, an old settler wagon came limping into the valley. A family, thin and silent, weary from storms and loss. When the father stepped out, he flinched at the sight of her. She recognized the expression immediately, the way men look when they're not sure if they're seeing a ghost or a warning. He didn't know her. Not really. But someone like him once had. Someone who left her behind. Someone who looked at her and saw nothing worth keeping. And now, here she stood full, alive, wrapped in the shawl of her people, with a daughter beside her who carried no memory of abandonment, only love. She didn't speak to him. She didn't need to. She turned to his wife, held out a small bundle of food and said, "For your journey." The woman took it, tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. And Wiaka nodded, because that was enough. Taku Wiaka asked her that night, "Why did you help them if they wouldn't help you?" She thought for a long time, then said, "Because I'm not them, and because I was saved." I don't forget that. That was the legacy she left. Not stories of war or greatness, but stories of returning, of standing still when the world told you to run, of opening your door when others closed theirs, of saying, "She's ours," even when she didn't yet believe it herself. Wihina passed on during the third winter, peacefully in sleep, surrounded by the women she had guided. Before her final breath, she reached for Wiaka's hand and whispered, "Now you wait for others." Wiaka buried her near the cedar grove, where the birds returned each spring. She didn't weep that day. She sang one of the old songs, the kind that didn't mean just carried. And the fire kept burning, and the wind kept speaking, and she kept walking not away from her past, but toward it, with each step a declaration. That the girl who had once been left behind no longer needed to be found. She had made a home, she had made a name, and she had made a world where no one would ever have to beg to be seen again.